Hi, everyone. I am grateful that I have the opportunity to speak with all of you again today as we move through this critical topic of navigating flare ups. I'll be walking you through the ins and outs and how you can better understand them and also prepare to help lessen their impact. This slide reviews the main topics for the presentation today, and as you can see, there is quite a lot that I have planned, so let's get started. Before we can move through the ins and outs of flare ups and how to navigate through them, we first have to review what flare ups are. I developed this acronym that breaks down some of the key parts of flare ups, especially for those who are less familiar, if you're a family member, even a provider. So I really want to make sure to go over this. They are often frightening and grief filled temporary periods where individuals experience a loss of functioning as their symptoms worsen, and this can happen either randomly or predictably, even after short or long periods of improvement. So, as you can imagine, experiencing these sudden and at times unexpected changes can be very triggering, scary, and difficult. Individuals living with POTS and other conditions where flare ups can occur spend so much time working towards symptom relief and improvement, and then to have an unexpected event or even an expected event lead to a flare up can kick up heavy grief and pain, both physical and emotional. I say they can occur predictably because, in time, as individuals live with these conditions and learn more about what their triggers are, they can predict that certain exposures will lead to flare ups, and sometimes these are calculated risks and decisions for their quality of life. I'll explain more on the next slide. I wanted to quickly walk through just a few examples that may shed more light on what individuals in the community living with PODS and or other chronic conditions experience. So in the first example on the left, you see someone experiencing worsening insomnia, tachycardia, and GI symptoms after spending a day in the hot weather with friends. It's likely that they felt some symptom relief before making the plans and either knew their symptoms would worsen, making a calculated decision that it would be worth the flare up, or perhaps it was unexpected and they had been able to do something like that before, either that week or that month without flaring. The example below that on the left depicts someone experiencing debilitating fatigue and brain fog after traveling to see family. Again, this either could have been an expected or an unexpected flare up. Sometimes there can be what I refer to as a cumulative trigger effect, which I will talk about shortly. But regardless, this can be confusing for family and friends to see because perhaps when they saw them, they seemed okay, but then the next day they may not be able to get out of bed. This can lead to a lot of confusion, dismissal, and even disbelief from those around us, magnifying the grief and pain already experienced. The other examples depicted here on the right demonstrate other flare ups triggered by weather fluctuations. Yes, weather fluctuations absolutely are demonstrated triggers for some individuals, including myself, especially with changes in barometric pressure, and then a flare up that led to a hospital admission after a viral infection, example here. So, viral infections can be more severe and debilitating triggers, and unfortunately, they can even lead to a longer worsening, potentially leading to a change in someone's baseline. That is for another session, but I do think it's important to share that here, as some in our community have experienced that. This has been seen for individuals who are exposed to triggers that can cause POTS, like COVID-19 and other viral infections, just as one example. It's hard because it really does vary from person to person, so I can't say anything definitively outside of what we've been seeing. And, there are these patterns that we can follow, and there is more data that is coming out as well. So I just briefly mentioned some flare-up triggers, but I wanted to dedicate more time to discussing these here and on the next slide. So flare-up triggers can vary from person to person, but there are also some consistent patterns. They refer to experiences or exposures that lead to a temporary worsening of someone's underlying symptoms and condition. So some may notice cumulative effects, and what I mean by that is that, well, we're going to talk about the bucket score later in this presentation, which I developed. But if you can visualize a bucket and then water within the bucket, imagine that individual triggers, some more than others, lead to water being poured into the bucket. And then at a certain point, there may be the last trigger that then leads to water accumulation. and the bucket overflowing, experienced as a flare up. So, in some cases, it isn't one trigger, but the accumulation of triggers that can have an impact and eventually lead to a flare up. But this can depend on how the trigger impacts the body, the symptoms severity before exposure, and other factors like co occurring conditions and how they contribute to what I refer to as trigger vulnerability. Some may notice predictable patterns over time and find that they can plan ahead well in advance if they know that a trigger like a flight or menstruation is going to lead to a flare up. Or there may be other times when there are very unpredictable flare ups, such as a traumatic event that impacts the nervous system and immune system, exposure to unexpected chemicals, or even certain foods. So you'll see here that I listed many of the common flare up triggers the POTS community often experiences. I hope you can see how many there are, as I think it reinforces how challenging this is for individuals and the community to navigate. They can range from certain medications like albuterol, missing certain medications needed for symptom relief like ivabradine, also known as Corlinor, different forms of traveling that can put a great deal of strain on the body, like flying, even spending time in cars, social events that can be hard on the body, and exposures that increase inflammation, such as infectious illnesses and or infections. It's also important to note, and this gets into the associated disability, that showering can cause a flare up for some, bathing. Another common trigger we see very often in the community is menstruation and or hormone fluctuations during the menstrual cycle. There's still a great deal we don't understand about why this in particular is such a trigger for so many in the community. But based on some of my reading, one of my theories is that there are links between certain hormone fluctuations and changes in immune system dysregulation, contributing to potential inflammation and changes in vessel vasoconstriction as well for some with POTS. So I hope that these are helpful to see. And I hope it's helpful to discuss at least some of them. And I think it can be an empowering way for us to take more control back as we learn more about possible triggers, focus more on tracking our symptoms to gain insight into what our triggers are, which Adam will be talking about during his presentation later today. And then ideally, we can learn how to navigate them in ways that are less debilitating and, dare I say, even empowering. So, before I talk more about what can help during flare ups, I do want to dedicate some time to acknowledge their heaviness. As I wrote here, flare ups can occur after individuals experience some improvement in underlying symptoms. So there's usually hope individuals have that perhaps they can do more, or perhaps they will be able to go to that event, or perhaps that shower will be easier, or perhaps it will be easier to play with their children, or perhaps they can cook that dinner standing up, or perhaps they can host that birthday party, or perhaps they can work on those emails for an hour, or perhaps they can watch part of that movie that they've been hoping to see for months. And then comes the flare up. So, after experiencing and feeling that hope that maybe they reached a new baseline, or maybe they will be able to enjoy more outings without more severe symptoms, in comes the flare up. A very unwelcome, harsh, and painful reminder of POTS and other chronic illnesses that individuals may have. And the weight of their grief is heavy. It can make individuals feel like they did something wrong, that the flare up is their fault, that they will never be able to go out again, that they're not ever going to experience relief again. It can be a reminder of their limitations, of how much has changed. The list really goes on. So, thought spirals can understandably happen during flare ups, and it's really important for us to talk about this and acknowledge this. So, let's take an even closer look. I put this together because I think this visual says a lot, and I think many in the community can feel this when looking at this image because it really is such a shared experience. So these are all part of the heaviness that I just described. There can be confusion, especially if you don't know what the trigger was and you randomly experience new and unfamiliar symptoms. There can be grief, some new and some reinforced, as grieving with a chronic illness honestly is often daily. It's just that some periods it's heavier and more noticeable. There can be despair. So, an example might be that, let's say, after 5 years of rehab and treatments, you're in a place where you finally feel that you can work part time. And you are so excited and grateful to have this opportunity. On the first day of your new job, they require that you stay late. And then on the drive home, you get stuck in traffic. You get home, crash, and experience a massive flare up the next day that requires you to call out of work. So here you worked for 5 years to reach a space where you could finally work part time. Say it was after losing a past career and so many other parts of yourself that you held dear. So, understandably, this would be devastating and also traumatic. So there's some repeated trauma here that can open wounds. There's fear during flare-ups. Some things asked also may include, how long am I going to feel this way? Am I getting permanently worse? Why did this happen? Am I ever going to get better? So the pain is both physical and emotional, and then there is isolation too. There can be shame during flare ups. Individuals may blame themselves, thinking that they caused the flare up. Maybe they feel embarrassed, or maybe they know that if they try to explain to their loved ones and those around them, that they will say things like, "Oh, you're fine. We saw you out yesterday and you looked great." So, all of this contributes to the heaviness and the isolation, feeling that no one will understand. And many individuals living with these conditions may prefer to be alone than risk being dismissed or misunderstood by those around them. The rest of this presentation is going to focus on how to make flare ups feel and be more manageable, and how to prepare proactively, and even how to help improve predictions for flare up risk reduction. So, here I've listed a number of accessible, healthy coping ideas for flare ups. It can vary from person to person. I really recommend that you have these as a part of your flare up action plan, choosing ones that are applicable for you. Healthy coping ideally is a daily activity, but some coping options may not be as available to us during flare ups. Just as one example, maybe we love to sit outside and maybe we love to read. But during flare ups, we get such severe migraines and symptoms like lightheadedness and weakness, leaving us unable to leave our bed. So, this is an example where an alternative healthy coping option, like listening to music or listening to an audiobook or cuddling a supportive furry friend, medication, unplugging, prayer. Sorry, go back. Blah, 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 blah. So, this is where alternative healthy coping options like listening to music, listening to an audiobook, cuddling a supportive furry friend, meditation, unplugging, prayer, and accessible crafts like sticker by number. Just as one example, some in the community love knitting and crochet, but that may also require more energy during flare up. So, it really, hopefully, you can choose some feasible options during your flare up, but it really also depends on the person. So, part of healthy coping does involve how we talk to ourselves during flare ups, the things we tell ourselves, and observing and being mindful of these. Sometimes reframing thoughts that come up. So, I listed a few of my examples here. Instead of saying to yourself, this flare up will never end, saying my flare ups have come to an end despite how hard they've been. Some in the community have reported that the more stressed they are during flare ups, the harder it is to get out of them. This makes sense because stress puts strain on the body and nervous system, and it can be a huge flare up trigger on its own. So, as hard as it may be, staying calm and supporting your body in this way can be helpful during flare ups, but it's not the only thing that's needed. Easing the strain on your nervous system, immune system, and body as a whole, however you can be helpful. I'm not saying to dismiss the grief and what's coming up for you. This is not an opportunity for toxic positivity, but I do think that a healthy balance is really key. And honestly, I never believe that toxic positivity should be included or should be a part of a I'm not saying to dismiss the grief and what's coming up for you, but I do think that healthy balance is really key. With practice, this gets easier and may come more naturally, especially as there is less flare up uncertainty and more familiarity. And as you have these conditions for a longer period of time, you're going to start to notice the patterns, and it will be easier to predict. But especially in the beginning of the journey, it can absolutely be more challenging. So, part of navigating flare ups involves having supportive tools. What helps most can vary, but I've shared some examples here that are more common. Body wipes and dry shampoo can help save energy and spoons, but she also, refers to energy if we can't shower. And some of these other items can as well. Some in our community may find that most of these items they use day to day already, even when they're not experiencing a flare up, but maybe they rely on them a little more heavily during a flare up. It really just depends on the person. So let's talk more about how we can proactively prepare for flare ups. So I have a lot that I would like to discuss specific to this topic, but first I have this list of questions that I think is helpful to review. This is one of the first proactive preparation steps as you're checking in with yourself and reflecting on what's helped you in the past, what you've learned, what you've observed, and what you know about your flare ups right now. Even if it's just one thing, that's still a step in the right direction. The next step that I feel is critical involves developing a flare up action plan. It can include medical resources, guidance, self care tools, etc., and can help with many aspects too. So, ideally, a really supportive flare up action plan includes information that stems from medical team coordination, nutrition preparation ahead of time, family member coordination options and items as applicable, organizing needed supplies so you can ensure that they're available to you, personalizing your flare up action plan so it meets your individual needs, and then preparing for when you have your next flare up, not if you do. So I developed a flare up action plan template that has been available on our website for those in need to review and print out, but I wanted to share a few pages of it here with you. So, of course, there are opportunities to personalize it, and I do think that personalizing it is very important. But I hoped it might be helpful to see just a few of the pages and what I recommend considering that you include. The items can range from medical guidance and recommendations to comforting songs you can listen to mental health support, to nutrition needs, preparation and planning, to proactive environment changes that make flare ups less likely, safer, and even less cumbersome. So this requires planning ahead of time. And if you have people that can support you with this, like an occupational therapist, a provider, or another trusted person, it can be really beneficial to work through these items collaboratively, especially before the brain hop fog hits. It can be beneficial to work through these items collaboratively, especially if you struggle with brain fog, as that's a common symptom and can make planning and organizing so much harder when you're nearing a flare up and especially once you're in a flare up. Here is just a list of more flare up plan ideas that are included in the A4P flare up plan template on our website. One of the items I included is a comforting note or letter that you can write to yourself when you're feeling better, that you can then read during your next flare up. And you can include messages that you want yourself to read and reminders that maybe will be harder to access when you're in a flare up. And other helpful reminders are also listed here. So we've talked about flare up triggers and what flare ups are, flare up coping, and flare up planning. And now I want to talk about flare up risk reduction. So I wouldn't say that flare up prevention is possible, but I absolutely think that risk reduction is. Some exposures are not within our control and are very unexpected, and it's why risk reduction is my main focus. It's helpful and important to learn more about what your triggers are through symptom tracking and how you can reduce exposures, but there are other components here too. So I've mentioned the additive effect of triggers and the overflowing bucket analogy, which is something that I'm going to be focusing on more here. The additive effect of triggers can increase flare up susceptibility. So, searching for patterns, signs, and recognizing your body as red flags while checking in regularly with your body on a daily basis, even like multiple times daily, and how you're feeling through symptom tracking is absolutely crucial. Some people may check in with themselves every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every hour. It really depends on the person and what they're experiencing, what they're going through. But those regular check ins are important. This is just a visual that I wanted to share, which I think many of us may be able to relate to at times. I think it does a good job of showing a bucket that's overflowing to the point where there are bandages on the sides trying to control what is a very large flare up. So, this is what we want to try and avoid if at all possible. Sometimes it is impossible, but sometimes it might be. Even flare ups are not made equal. Some can be much worse than others. So, the times when it's possible to reduce even flare up severity and our susceptibility is what I would like to focus on, is that is something that's within our control. So, a few years ago, I developed what I referred to as the bucket score. It's a way to help visualize and understand while simplifying what's happening in our bodies to reduce the likelihood of flare ups and better predict them ahead of time. You can see the breakdown on the slide here. So if you consider that all of us have a figurative bucket we need to monitor, as it fills and fills through triggers, it can overflow more easily, and overflowing represents a flare up. The bucket score is used to help us calculate how full our buckets are and what that means for how we need to take care of our bodies. The higher the bucket score, the more vulnerable we are to flare ups. And the ultimate goal is to support flare up risk reduction. So I'd like to walk through the parts of the bucket score now, as there are a few different steps. Ideally, this is helpful for some of you, as I did create this with the community in mind. And part one is mostly a reflection exercise, really thinking about what the signs are that you're feeling better. Perhaps you're able to stand up more easily, or you experience less nausea when eating, or it's easier to sit up, or you're able to listen to an audiobook, whatever those signs are for you. Then considering what the signs are that you are more overwhelmed and not feeling as well. Maybe it's snapping more easily at people in your life, feeling annoyed by things, or crying more easily, self isolating, considering what those signs are for you. And then the signs that your body is more reactive. Is it that your heart rate is higher in different positions? Do you have more trouble breathing? What are those for you? And then do the same thing when reflecting on these other areas that include your stress level, grief, and other general signs that you are nearing a flare. I have to emphasize here that the cause of POTS, ME, CFS, MCAS, EDS, and other conditions we're discussing today is not psychological, but that does not mean that significant emotional stress, trauma, and overwhelm can impact the immune system and body in ways that can contribute to flares. Studies have demonstrated time and time again how unhealthy stress is for the body, and the link between stress and inflammation and immune system dysregulation. So I don't want anyone here to misconstrue what I'm sharing, so I really want to reinforce that. Here we have part two. So after the reflection exercise in part one, which you may not need to do each time, you will rate each of the following on a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being the worst and 0 being the best for you. So you should have a total of 3 separate scores that are written down, or you can have them on your phone or a tablet or whatever is easiest for you. Here we have part three. I tried to break this down and organize it in the least confusing way, but I'm going to walk you through it step by step. So first, you're going to take these 3 separate scores from part 2 listed here on the left, which includes the symptom severity, stress level, and flare-up level scores, and add them together to get your unadjusted total. From there, take the unadjusted total and divide it by 3. The final score will tell you what zone you're in. If your score is less than 3, you're in the green zone. If it's between 3 and 4.9, you're in the yellow zone. If it's between 5 through 7, you're in the orange zone. And if your score is greater than 7, then you're in the red zone. Here I review some zone considerations that are merely a guide you can personalize to meet your individual needs. So for individuals who find that they're in the green zone, perhaps this means that they can prepare ahead for the next flare-up and engage in safe forms of movement. The yellow zone, you can see here that you would be limiting exposure to stress even more so than in the green zone, increasing pacing, increasing rest intervals. In the orange zone, you can see you would be preparing for your next flare-up by reviewing your flare-up plan, enacting stricter boundaries, increasing rest intervals and pacing, etc. Lastly, for the red zone, you would need to enact the full flare-up plan, have strict rest boundaries, strict rest reduction. So again, these are merely considerations. It's all about checking in with yourself and practicing flare-up risk reduction strategies to help increase your daily quality of life and functioning. I wanted to put together a quick bucket score example for everyone. You can see on the left-hand side that I can apparently predict the future, which is interesting because this is Monday, July 7th, 2025. The three scores are listed 8, 7, and 8, and the unadjusted total for those scores is 23. Then I took the unadjusted total, which is seen in the box below, divided it by 3, and discovered that with my total score being 7.6, I am in the red zone. So on the right-hand side, you can see my red zone plan. Again, this is just an example list, some ideas, and again, it will vary, but you have the stricter boundaries potentially, which may include with screen time or time spent texting, canceling unessential events and plans, reviewing your hospital plan, increasing forced rest, etc. Here are some reminders for providers that I felt were important to include, those living with chronic illnesses like POTS, EDS, MCAS, and ME/CFS, just as a few examples. Often minimize their symptoms and how severe they are. This can be unconscious as they've adapted to a new baseline, or it can be conscious and perhaps they don't feel safe sharing how severe they are with you. As trust builds, the hope is that they will feel more comfortable, but given the frequency of medical trauma and distrust in the healthcare system, trust building is going to take time for many. Please be patient, and your involvement in flare-up risk reduction and preparation can make a difference. Please be mindful of the cause and effect with mental health symptoms. Yes, when someone's in pain and is scared because of the symptoms they're experiencing, they may be anxious. They may experience other mental health symptoms as well. That does not mean that the cause of their flare-up is anxiety. The cause is a different debilitating condition. Anxiety can also be a debilitating condition, but it's important to be mindful of the differences. And the anxiety condition will not respond to treatments we use for individuals experiencing these kinds of flare-ups. So it's really, we experiencing these kinds of flare-ups. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach, and individualized care is important. Please screen for co-occurring conditions. It's very common for individuals with POTS to have other co-occurring conditions that can be contributing to their POTS and impact POTS management. A perfect example is MCAS, and when properly treated, as Dr. Harris shared yesterday, it may actually help with POTS symptoms for some. So please keep this in mind and screen. Here are some reminders for loved ones that I wanted to include. So sudden shifts in symptoms and severity are common, not unusual when living with POTS and these other conditions. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be concern and medical evaluation, but it means that your loved one going from being able to walk on Thursday and being bedbound on Friday does not mean that they are dramatizing what they're experiencing. It's a very painful part of this journey, and your active participation in flare-up management can make a difference. You may actually notice signs that your loved one doesn't. So open communication with them to determine how they want this feedback could be helpful, and if they want the feedback, please be mindful of your individual needs for self-care, as it's essential for everyone, you included. And please also remember that although there are parts of this journey and aspects how these conditions impact the community that absolutely are visible, the majority of what is experienced is not visible. So kindness, patience, and understanding go such a long way. Believing what your loved one is going through is a choice, even if you don't fully understand. Last but not least, I have some reminders for individuals living with these conditions, sometimes referred to as spoonies. So flare-ups are painful reminders that your body has changed. Perhaps you were used to a healthy body a few years ago, and now each flare-up is a reminder of the losses you've experienced. Please offer yourself grace. There's no right way to grieve during flare-ups, and understand that flare-ups absolutely may increase mental health challenges. This is also deserving of support and understandable. It's seen in other chronic conditions. Remember that what helps during flare-ups often varies. What helps one of your friends with POTS might not help you, and that's all right. We are all different. Please remember that your worth is not dependent on your productivity. Who you are is not dependent on what you can physically do. Many in the community are used to being the overachiever, and it can be a huge adjustment when all of a sudden that aspect of your life drastically shifts. You're hearing from someone, me, who lost her career that she loved to chronic illness, and now I have a different career and path that has been a blessing and so meaningful for me. But losing that other part of me hasn't been easy. So we're all human. We're all doing the best that we can. I'm so proud of each and every one of you for being here, for fighting for what you need, for surviving, and I see you. Have some flare up resources here that I wanted to share. I put these together over the last few years for the community and really hope that they can make a difference. These are some PDF forms. Blah, blah, blah. There are some PDF forms for the bucket score and the flare up plan, which you can print out and adjust to meet your needs. So I hope that there was at least one takeaway from this presentation that makes a difference for you or a difference for someone that you really care about. I will be at the Q&A today, so you can either submit a question through Whova here for me to answer, or you can send me an email privately. And thank you for your time.